Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my channel. This is Reading After Dark, and I am MJ. Today, I'm going to be filming my 10 best, well, it's not going to be entirely 10, but it's going to be the best books that I read in 2023 and the worst books that I read in 2023. I read a lot of books last year, and I have more worst books than best books just because, unfortunately, last year was like a bad reading year in terms of quality. I read a lot of really just super shit books. I feel as though, honestly, my worst books of the year list could have been like 25 or 30 books long. Like, there's so many books that I could rant about. And I even thought about making a video attempting to go through all of the books that I read last year, but I felt like it would be too long, and I just knew I would get caught up on some and rant about them for way too long. So I have 8 books that were the best books that I read last year and 10 books that were the worst. I thought about splitting this into 2 videos, but I think I'm just going to keep it one and try to be as concise as possible. Okay, so first let's start with the 8 best books that I read last year, starting with, these are in no particular order, by the way, for either best or worst. I just kind of tried to scroll through and grab the ones. So the first one is Call Me by Your Name by, I believe, Andre Eichmann. Wow, this book is so good. It's so beautiful. It's one of the most beautifully written books I've ever read, and pretty famous too. But if you're unfamiliar with Call Me by Your Name, it is a sapphic love story between a young man and an older gentleman who's kind of come to Italy to study, and our main character is just utterly obsessed with him. I think this book does such a fabulous job of exhibiting the sexual obsession that you can feel when you're a teen, and how that can sometimes be confused for a grander love. The age difference does make me feel a little bit yucky. I have not seen the movie yet, but I do want to see it. But outside of that, though, like it's just really beautiful. I really have nothing too much more to say other than the writing is so beautiful and the story itself is just really well told. Definitely one that I would like to read again and annotate. I have a couple of books that I read last year that I want to reread and annotate them, and some of them I might even just do this year. I don't know. I don't know if it's just reading them again the next year is too soon, but also it's my life, so, maybe I just will. But so the next book that I have is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I loved this book. It really surprised me. I was kind of hesitant going into it because I did not love The Poppy War. I only read the first book. I've thought about continuing with the series and trying to give it more of a chance, but we'll see. So I was really hesitant when I was first diving into it, but it ends up being just such a wild ride, and I loved it so much. It's a dark academic story where you follow our main character, who is kind of plucked out of China as a child and dropped at Oxford to study languages, and he kind of learns along the way that the system that is bolstering him and kind of helping him is also sort of oppressing people like him and people from his country. I believe it's China that he's plucked from. It's been a hot minute since I've read it, but I believe it's China. Really incredible, really unique magic system. The magic system uses language, and I think that is so interesting and so fun. Like, if you're super nerdy like I am, it's just really cool to think about language in the way that R.F. Kuang presents it in this book and the way that the characters use it. It's a really interesting magic system and kind of hard to describe, but really cool when you get it and when you get to see it in action. The book itself it's truly incredible. It's really thoughtful and really emotional, and is exploring a lot of really tricky topics, but in such a nuanced and interesting way. So I really enjoyed it. It really surprised me. It was huge kudos to her because she just crushed it. Next, I have the Red Rising trilogy by Pierce Brown. I binged this trilogy this year and had the most fun binging it. I read the first book quite a few years ago. I listened to it as an audiobook. I listened to all 3 of these as audiobooks this year, but I listened to it as an audiobook, and I remember a lot of people will say this about the Red Rising trilogy, where the first book feels kind of a lot like Hunger Games, but then the second and third book veer in totally different directions, and they feel totally different, and they're really exciting and fun. And that is so true. It's so crazy true. I read the first book a few years ago and I was like, yeah, it feels a little Hunger Gamesy. And honestly, it was one of those books that like it came in and it went out. I forgot so much of what I read and so much of what the book was about. The same thing kind of happened this year where I listened to the first book again because I was like, I'm going to give this trilogy another try. And I was still like equally kind of unimpressed. I was like, yeah, it's a little Hunger Gamesy, and there's so many details that I forgot. Like it went in and I was like, wow, I don't remember reading any of this book. This is basically a brand new book. And then once I finished it and moved on with the trilogy, looking back at the trilogy, I don't know that I could tell you a lot about the first book, honestly, like other than just really basic plot points. But like if you wanted to discuss it, I think I'd just falter so hard because it's not incredibly I don't know. It's really like it's not an exceptionally remarkable book, but it is really fun. The next two books in the series, though, everybody says it, and they're so right. They're so different and they're so hardcore. I loved them. I loved this trilogy so much. I loved the way that it ended. Yeah, I felt it was the kind of series that you end it and you feel like exhausted, but in a good way. You kind of feel like you went through everything that these characters went through right alongside them. You feel just as tired and kind of dejected as they do, but also really like hopeful at the end. It was just really, really well done. I did try to continue with the series. I know that he's writing more recent books now, and I might try again later, but I did end up DNFing the fourth one. I think, I forget what it's like, Iron something. Or maybe it's Iron Gold, because I think I like to call it FEAU. Because that's so stupid. But anyway, I did try, and it follows some of the old characters and also introduces new characters. And I didn't love that. I kind of wish that we could leave the old characters behind or even just have them as cameos. I did not love that we were continuing their story because I felt very satisfied with the way that their story ended. And I didn't like the choices that were being made in this new series. Like it just felt a little bit like a rehash of some of the stuff I felt like we had already explored and come to a conclusion about. So I didn't love that. So I did end up DNFing it, but I've thought about revisiting it just because I did start it up like right on the heels of me finishing the third book. And maybe I just needed to give myself a little bit of time and some breathing room before jumping into the second set in the series. But the original trilogy is incredible. I stand by that. It's amazing. If you're not familiar with Red Rising, it is on Mars. It has been colonized. It's essentially kind of a hierarchy system based on the color that you're like designated. So there's like reds being the kind of lowest in society, and the world is sort of built on their labor. And then there's the golds, which are like the highest of society, and they're the most intelligent, the most fit, and all that stuff. And our main character, Darrow, is a red, and he ends up infiltrating the golds and becomes a part of elite society. And all the good stuff that sparks a revolution. But truly, the second and third books are where it's at. If you do read the first book and you feel a little disappointed, I promise, I know that everybody says it, and I know that you might kind of finish the first book and feel like, I just feel like this is a rehash of so many tropes and things. I do promise that the second one, like, do give it a chance. It is truly, truly, truly worth it. I mean, the series isn't perfect, but it is really good and really worth it. Okay, I'm back. I like to drink juice out of a wine glass because I hate wine, but I love wine glasses. So like I'll drink anything out of a wine glass. I just think it's really fun. The next series that I have, it's a whole trilogy. Again, I binged it this year. It was really good. Is Drowning Empire series by Andrea Stewart. Fabulous trilogy. I had so much fun reading this trilogy. It's a debut series. This was so much fun for me. As I was saying earlier, like throughout the year, I was kind of reading like really just to get through things quickly. I wasn't reading a ton of fantasy, so it felt really amazing, partially just a return to form to be able to read fantasy again and to kind of binge this trilogy. It was so good. This trilogy starts out with these two characters. So we have Lynn, who is the daughter of the emperor. We have Jovis, who is the smuggler. We have, I think it's pronounced Feilu, who is the daughter of a governor on the island. Renami, her girlfriend, one who is the daughter of the emperor, and she is kind of vying for the spot of emperor. Her father is he's abusive. He's like he's pitting his two children against each other. He sort of reveals to them information about like being emperor and the magic system, which is bone shard magic. It like can create constructs and whatnot. And he kind of reveals this information to them as they perform pleasingly, and he'll like give them keys to different rooms throughout the palace, and you have to sort of earn each room in the palace. And so there's this level of competition, but there's also a lot of intrigue as to like what are in these rooms. There's a lot of court politics that kind of take place during this character's journey in her chapters. And then we have another character who's a smuggler. He's kind of your like standard smuggler, but his journey is anything but standard. And his story follows him trying to find his wife who was stolen 10 years ago. And everybody kind of knows there are these like thieves who kind of come in the night and they leave behind a certain amount of money that's supposed to be like, you know, here's the money for this person. Sorry, we have to take them, but we have to take them, you know? And he decides to try to chase them down. He's been like kind of chasing her for 10 years, hoping to find her. And the story starts out with him on an island that ends up sinking and causes a lot of chaos. And then we also follow two other characters who are on their own island. One is the daughter of the sort of governor of that island, and the other one is her girlfriend, and she was like a street rat, but she's sort of grown up and found her own way in the world. And then finally, we have a character perspective that's a very mysterious character perspective. So I'm not going to tell you really anything about this person other than we see them on an island and they don't really have any memories of their life. They just know that they live on this island and contribute to life here. But other than that, there's not a lot that they know. So yeah, it's incredible. The character work is so much fun watching all of these different people grow. I do have criticism of the series. There are things that I don't like. Feilu's character, I actually think that Feilu and Renami's storyline, they're probably my least favorite. They're just the least engaging to me, and they kind of have like not as much growth as I feel like the other characters have. So at the end of the day, I don't love them as much, but truly the trilogy itself is amazing. I love all of the moving parts. I love where the series goes. It's wonderful. Honestly, like do go read it. It is such a good time. I had such a good time binging it. I love the magic system. It's really creative and really interesting. And the world building is also really well done. Like it's just a really interesting world. I will definitely be picking up pretty much anything that Andrea Stewart probably puts out here in the next few years. Next, we have Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by somebody. Yay! We have Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. Can you believe it? It's a physical book that I have to show you. All of these books on my shelf. And I didn't pick up a single physical book. I have the physical edition of most of these books, and I didn't pick up a single one. That is super my bad. I'm so sorry. This is one of the most beautiful covers I've ever seen in the world, by the way. I love it so much. I think it is so pretty. This book is incredible. This book, I read it this year, and I made everybody else read it. I made my boyfriend read it. His mom read it. It was such a good time. I kind of don't want to say a lot about like what this book is. Essentially, just know that you are following these two characters who have been friends for a while. They were friends when they were kids, and then they sort of re-meet as adults, and it's really about their friendship and their journey and just kind of about life. They build a video game together and eventually kind of create a video game company, and it's really great. You don't have to like video games or even know anything about video games to enjoy this book. It is truly a masterpiece. It's so emotional, and I love the way that it examines character relationships and really just the relationships that you have in your life throughout your life. You've either already read it or you have heard so much about it. It's emotional, it's impactful. It's another book that I want to reread this year and do kind of a full in-depth, like spoilery book talk for. So maybe look out for that. I'm not going to make any promises that I'm going to reread it this year. Next up, oh, we're almost done. Sad. Okay. Next up, I have Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. This book Also really good. Also, kudos to her for making it on the list twice. It was amazing. This book is about a woman who is a white author and ends up stealing the work of an Asian author, an Asian American author, and kind of like sort of presents herself to potentially be Asian American or of some kind of Asian descent, and is very deceptive. And the book receives a lot of accolades, and it's kind of her just like being insane, really. It's also amazing. This is also a book that I made my boyfriend read this year because I was like, it's just so good. It's so bananas. I love this book. There's a lot of discourse around this book, and I encourage you to go look it up and watch other videos. It's really interesting. And I think what's great about this book is I don't necessarily like disagree with the discourse around it. I don't disagree with the people who disliked this book or have something to say about its message. It's a really interesting one. I think it's really thoughtful, and the conversations that have come up around it, super solid and super interesting. Something that I personally love about this book is it just a little bit feels like drama, like gossip. It just, it feels like you're watching this person make the wildest, craziest choices that anyone could make in this situation. And there's a hilarity to it that is so fun and so addicting. It's really fast paced. I do feel like the ending, like, is a little kind of falls, in a way that like the book is so fast paced and the action is so great and the choices are so bananas, and the ending just feels a little bit lesser compared to the rest of the book, at that like less high intensity than the rest of the book. But overall, still really fantastic. And I love, participating in the conversations and hearing other people's thoughts on this book. So definitely let me know if you read this book, what your thoughts were. Lastly is Rouge by, I believe, Mona Awad is how you say that. This book is really good. This book is like kind of a creepy, thrillery, like get under your skin, give you those weird, like tinglies. It follows this daughter whose mother has passed, and her mother was a part of this kind of beauty cult, and it was really obsessed with youth and, that glowy skin and all the things. And she goes down, I believe the daughter lives in Canada and her mother lives in California, and so she goes down to California after her mother's passing and kind of lives in her house and ends up in the cult, kind of. Yeah, I like, this is definitely the kind of book that I don't want to say too much about because I don't want to spoil anything for you. It's definitely the kind that you should go in like just not knowing anything. I thought it was fabulous. I had such a good time. I thought it was so creepy and so atmospheric. It's worth your time if you are into that kind of creepy atmospheric story. I don't know. I was almost going to say that it's kind of slow, but I don't know that it really is slow. It's just atmospheric, creepy, really good. It's very chilling. It kind of, it absolutely is an exploration of like what we do for beauty, what we do for youth. Is it really worth it? But then also just being a really well done, like I feel in a sense that this is kind of a modern gothic horror, not a gothic horror in the sense that it follows the tropes of a gothic horror and like there's a creepy house and those kinds of things, although the mother's house is kind of creepy in its own right. But there's just something about this story that hits me in the same place that gothic horror stories that I really love do. It gives me that same kind of like eerie, creepy feeling. And I really, really loved it for that. So those are the 8 best books that I read this year. I think I am going to split this video into 2 parts because I think this one got a little long. So next will be the 10 worst books that I read this year. Yeah, let me know in the comments down below what the best books that you read in 2023 were, and I will see you next time with another video. Goodbye.